Hello and thank you for joining me here at Why the Book Wins, where I compare books with their movie adaptations. My name is Laura, and today is my Christmas episode, so Merry Christmas. It is just a few days away now. Christmas is my favorite holiday. I was gonna say I love this time of year, and I do for the holiday aspect, but I don't like the cold weather, and I like the snow until it's time to go on a run or something, and then I hate running in the snow. But I still love Christmas, and I love just the vibe of the Christmas season, so I do love that, and it's worth putting up with the cold weather to get Christmas. Which it's funny because that sentiment is very fitting for my topic today, because Narnia is cursed for it to always be winter and never Christmas. Which Christmas is the best part of winter, right? Once Christmas is over, then January and February and March just kind of suck because there's no Christmas to balance things out, right? Anyway, I'm covering The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis, published in 1950, and I will be comparing it with the 2005 adaptation directed by Andrew Adamson. And so this is technically the second book in the Narnia series, but it was the first book that C.S. Lewis wrote. So he wrote them in a different order, but then once they were all published, the reading recommended order is to read this one second and read The Magician's Nephew first. And The Magician's Nephew explains, things from The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. For example, it explains why there's a lamppost in Narnia, it explains why the wardrobe leads to Narnia, it explains the origins of the White Witch. But reading this one did make me want to go back and read the whole series again, because I have read these before. But I'm going to read them in the order in which they were written. So Magician's Nephew isn't until the end. And I think that's kind of cool to have one of the last books be, flash forward and explain how it all began in a way. So I'm going to read all of these books again in the order in which they were published. But yeah, Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe was the first book in the Narnia series that was published, even though it is recommended that you read this one second in the actual series. But as far as Christmas goes, my last year Christmas episode was for A Christmas Carol. I compared it with the 1980s George C. Scott adaptation, so I will link to that in case you want to check that one out to keep the Christmas spirit going. But yeah, I'm wearing white with red nail polish, and I have my holly berry earrings, and my bookshelves have been decorated for Christmas, so very festive today. And also, Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is fitting for Christmas because, Narnia is cursed for it to never be Christmas, but eventually Santa Claus is able to make it through. So the fact that the book and movie have Santa Claus makes it very fitting for Christmas. But then obviously Aslan and, this book in particular has a lot of religious symbolism, which if you're a Christian, Christmas is about the birth of Christ, so it's very fitting in that sense as well. I know not everybody is interested in hearing the religious aspects of this book though, necessarily, so I will save that talk for the end of the video, so if you're not interested in it, then you can exit out before I get to that section. And onto the book review. So like I said, I have read this book before. I've read this whole series at least once. There's a few books that are my favorite. I've read multiple times. The Last Battle, The Silver Chair are the two that I know I have read 3 times. Horse and His Boy I've read at least twice. But yeah, Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, I think I might have only read it once before because it wasn't a personal favorite, so I haven't returned to it through the years. Even though it wasn't a personal favorite, I did enjoy it this time around. I was surprised how quick things happen. It is a children's book, and he does not give you any time to be bored with the story because things move about at a fast pace, and he doesn't get over detailed on anything, so it definitely is aimed for kids with a shorter attention span. However, even as an adult, I don't mind a book that, keeps things going. And there is nostalgia for me reading this book, so I'm a little biased because, like I said, my whole family, I think everyone in my family read these books, and we grew up watching the BBC adaptations. When the 2005 movie came out, we went to theaters to go see it, which was a big deal for my family because the movie theater was an hour away, and there were a lot of us. So to pay for tickets for all us kids to go see the movie was a big deal. But yeah, so Narnia was a big part of my family growing up, and so I do have a soft spot for it for that reason. And on to the movie. So like I said, we saw this in theaters. At that time, I was already a teenager, and the only thing I remember from seeing this in theaters was James McAvoy as Mr. Tumnus. I thought he was so cute, so handsome. Even in his fawn getup, I still thought he was very attractive. And honestly, that's all I remember from this movie because I hadn't seen it since then. And I went into it with low expectations because of the fact I hadn't seen it since then. I was I must not have liked it because I never watched it again. But I was pleasantly surprised, and I really enjoyed this movie, and I thought it was a great adaptation. It is a bit long. It's 2.5 hours, and there is one segment in particular that I feel could have been cut down to bring down that runtime, but nonetheless, I really enjoyed this adaptation and I would definitely recommend it. I do think the casting of Edmund and Lucy, I thought they were the best. I loved those actors and those roles. Tilda Swinton I liked in the role of the White Witch. However, I didn't love, like, she has the weird dress she wears part of the time, and she just didn't look the way I pictured the White Witch. Her performance is great. It was just, as far as her look, it just wasn't what I had envisioned, but I still thought she was good ultimately. And to get into differences between book and movie, which there will be spoilers for the book and movie in this podcast, which I feel like everybody knows the story of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, which I have my leather-bound Barnes & Noble edition, I think. I bought this actually years ago. I've had this edition for a long time. But anyway, I feel like this story is so famous everybody already knows, but there will be spoilers for those who don't know. Spoiler warning now. But to get started with just the beginning of the book and movie. So in the book, when it gets started, we are told that they are going out into the country because there are air raids happening in London. This is, the late 1940s. And so there are air raids happening. So their parents are having them sent out to the country to stay with their uncle who is a professor, to stay with him where it is safer. Whereas in the movie, we begin when they're at home still and we see the air raids or the bombs happening. And also from the start, we see a friction between Peter and Edmund, because they run out to the bomb shelter, but then Edmund runs back inside to get a picture of his dad, which was very foolish because it's dangerous, and so Peter is yelling at him at what an idiot he is for going back there. And so we also see in that scene that their dad isn't around, so he either is dead or he's fighting in the war. And we later find out that he's still alive and he's fighting in the war. But anyway, so that was not in the book, that intro scene at their home. And by the way, in the movie, Peter was a bit harsh with Edmund because he gets mad at him because Edmund ran out when it was dangerous, but I feel like he could have been a bit more understanding. Whereas in the book, Edmund is just kind of not a brat, but he just seems a bit difficult for no particular reason, whereas in the movie, like, you could kind of, maybe he was fleshed out a bit more, and so you kind of felt for him more. So it seemed like Peter was being too harsh to him in the movie. But yeah, they get to the professor's home, and there are 3 trips into Narnia, and all of them are basically the same, like, as far as, like, why they go into the wardrobe is different the third time from book to movie, but that's, like, such a minor change. The reasoning is so minor, it's, like, not even worth mentioning. But yeah, the first time it's just Lucy. She finds the wardrobe that leads to Narnia, and she goes in there, and she meets Mr. Tumnus. She comes back out, she tells them about it, and no one believes her, of course. And they even go check, and it's just a wardrobe with a wall, so they think she must have been lying. The second time in, it is Lucy and Edmund, and Lucy goes to see Mr. Tumnus, whereas Edmund, like, immediately meets the White Witch, who introduces herself as the Queen of Narnia, and she wins Edmund over by giving him Turkish Delight and making promises about how he can be King of Narnia if he just comes back to her castle with all of his brothers and sisters. Then she will make him king, and, his siblings can be his slaves or his servants or whatever. And Edmund and Peter don't get along, so Edmund loves the idea of making Peter his servant and Edmund being king. And then Lucy and Edmund come back from Narnia, and Lucy is so excited because now someone has been to Narnia too, and they'll know that she's not making it up. However, when she approaches her siblings about it, Edmund lies, and he's like, oh, we were just playing pretend, we didn't actually go into Narnia. And so, of course, Lucy is very hurt, and this obviously makes the reader dislike Edmund all the more for lying about it. But then the third time, all 4 kids, Peter, Edmund, Susan, and Lucy, go into Narnia, all 4 of them. And then I did want to talk about the Turkish Delight, which is, she has this potion and she asks, meaning the White Witch, she asks Edmund what he wants to eat and he says Turkish Delight. So then she pours this potion and bam, there's Turkish Delight. And in the book, it talks about how the food she makes from this potion, like, is magical, and it makes people addicted to it because it says how he eats all of it and he, like, can't stop eating until it's empty, and then once there's none left, like, he can't stop thinking about it and he just wants more Turkish Delight, and he's, like, willing to do whatever it takes to get more of this Turkish Delight. So that's why later he wants to get back to the Queen's castle because he has been promised that he will get more Turkish Delight, and it has just this addictive quality to it where it makes him obsessed with it, and he, like, wants to get more of it and will do anything to get more Turkish Delight. So I thought that was really interesting because that is not implied in the movie at all, and I had totally not remember that aspect of the book. So it makes Edmund a bit more likable knowing that he has that excuse, right? Like, it's not all his fault of him just being a brat or something. Like, he actually ate this magical food that will make him obsessed with getting more of that food. And when Lucy met Mr. Tumnus the first time, he tells her that the White Witch, who calls herself the Queen of Narnia, has told the people of Narnia that if any of them come across a human that they need to bring that human to her. And the reason why is because there is a prophecy that says Aslan, the king of Narnia, who is a lion, he is going to return to Narnia, break the curse that Narnia is under, and that 4 humans will become king and queens of Narnia and get rid of the witch. And so she, of course, doesn't want any humans showing up, and if they do, she wants to hurry and get rid of them. That way the prophecy cannot happen. But Mr. Thomas doesn't turn Lucy in, and so his life is in danger because she has spies everywhere. And so when the next time all 4 of them do end up coming back into Narnia, and once they're there, Lucy is like, let's go see Mr. Thomas. So they go to his house and they see that he has been taken by the Queen's Guard because someone told on him that he was with Lucy. And it was Edmund. When Edmund saw the White Witch, he told her that his sister Lucy had been there hanging out with a fawn, and so the White Witch went and got rid of Mr. Thomas, and she turned him to stone because she has a wand that can turn people to stone. But yeah, so they go to Mr. Thomas's house, see he's not there, and then from there they are led to the home of Mr. and Mrs. Beaver, and then at Mr. and Mrs. Beaver's house they tell them all about the prophecy and about how the 4 of them are meant to be kings and queens of Narnia, and they say that Aslan is currently in Narnia and that they need to take the humans to him. And at some point while they are talking about this, Edmund ends up sneaking out. And in the book, they're all on board for this. They're, Peter and Susan. Lucy, of course, because she wants to save Mr. Thomas because she feels bad because it was her fault in a way that he was taken away. And then when they're looking for Edmund, Mr. Beaver is like, I could tell he had a look about him. I know he's been with the White Witch and he's probably going to her house right now. And if you want to save him, the only way you can save him is by seeing Aslan. So we should just go head out right now because Edmund, if he's with the White Witch, he's going to tell them everything that he's heard. So we need to leave here because she's about to send her wolves to our home. And so then they pack up and they head out to the stone table where Aslan and all of the good guys are all gathered together. So that is the book. On to the movie. So in the movie, they meet with the Beavers. The Beavers tell them the whole prophecy. Edmund sneaks out. But then Peter and Susan, when they hear about, this prophecy about how they're going to get rid of the witch and they're meant to be kings and queens and there's going to be a battle between good and evil, they're like, we left London to get away from a war. We're not about to get involved in some other war and put our lives in jeopardy. And so they are very resistant to this. And they're like, you know what? We're just going to go back home. Let's all go, guys. But then they look and they can't find Edmund. And so the Beaver is like, if you want to save Edmund, you just need to meet Aslan. You don't have a choice now. So they're kind of forced into continuing to stay in Narnia and to go meet Aslan in order to save Edmund. Otherwise, they were just wanting to go home. So that was different from book to movie. What was also different from book to movie is that in the book, the wolves go to the Beaver's home, but by the time the wolves get there, the Queen's wolves, the Beavers and the kids are gone. So it's totally fine. Whereas in the movie, they tried to build the suspense by having the wolves show up while they are still in there packing. And so they have to go through this tunnel to escape the wolves. There's the scene with this fox who helps throw the wolves off the trail, and then later on the next day they're on this frozen river and the wolves are there yet again, and all the stuff with the wolves I thought could have been cut out. That's 10 minutes, probably not 15, maybe 15, 10 to 15 minutes worth of the movie that I think could have been cut out, and I just wasn't enjoying, and I just got a little bored with those parts. It was supposed to be exciting and build tension, but I just wasn't really liking it. But in both book and movie, after they leave the Beaver's house, the next day is when Santa Claus shows up, Father Christmas, and he gives Peter a sword, he gives Susan a bow and arrow, and he gives Lucy this potion that heals people. And that's in both book and movie. But in the movie, the wolves show up yet again after Father Christmas has shown up, and so Peter has his new sword and he's pointing it at the wolves, acting like he's gonna fight them off. And you have the Beavers encouraging Peter, but then you have Susan who is like, put the sword down, who do you think you are? You're just a kid, what are you doing? And so Susan as well is just very hesitant to accept this new role they have been given in terms of leading Narnia to victory kind of a thing. But yeah, so that's something both of them struggle with, Peter and Susan. And I was fine with having them have this struggle in the movie, which was not in the book. However, my complaint is just the scene with the wolves. Just show their struggle, but get rid of all of the boring wolf stuff that just was dragged out way too long, and it would have been better. And of course, Peter and Susan in the movie, as the movie goes along, they end up accepting these roles and embracing it. Whereas in the book, they embrace it right away, basically. But moving on to Edmund. So he shows up at the Queen's castle, he tells them about the Beavers, he tells them about Aslan, and he is very sad to see that the Queen is not as nice as she had been the first time, and she is not giving him any Turkish delight, and she is very upset with him because he did not bring his brothers and sisters with him. And in the movie, he is put in this prison area, and he meets Mr. Thomas, who is still alive, and the two of them talk, and the White Witch tells Mr. Thomas that Edmund is the one who told on him, and then and she turns Mr. Tumnus to stone. Whereas in the book, he never talks with Mr. Tumnus because by the time he gets to the Queen's castle, Mr. Tumnus has already been turned into a statue. But yeah, when he tells the White Witch where the kids are and where Aslan is, she and Edmund and her dwarf, go off to go find them. And Edmund is just miserable, and as his time with the witch goes on, he just is more remorseful for what he has done, and he wants to change his ways, and he wants to get away from the White Witch. And like I said, the White Witch had cursed Narnia for it to always be winter and never Christmas, but then Santa Claus shows up, showing that the White Witch's curse is losing power because Aslan has shown up. And as they are on their journey to the stone table, the snow starts to melt and it basically becomes spring, so showing that, once again, her curse is losing a lot of its power. But yeah, so eventually the kids and the Beavers make it to the stone table where Aslan is, or it's like somewhere in the stone table area. And Aslan is there and he's gathered, all these people, all these centaurs and other mythical creatures together, talking animals, and everybody's excited. And he ends up sending a couple people out, none of the kids, but like some of the other people, he sends them out to go rescue Edmund from the White Witch. And in both book and movie, the rescuing Edmund scene is very quick and just, it seems way too easy in both book and movie. But yeah, so they go there, grab Edmund, bring him back, and all is well, basically. Well, all isn't quite well, because then the White Witch shows up the next day and she's like, hey, you took Edmund, and according to the deep magic, Edmund is mine, because anyone who deflects onto my side stays mine, and you can't take them because that's ruining the deep magic of Narnia. And so Aslan says that he will talk to the White Witch in private, and then she leaves and it seems like everything is fine because he says Edmund's life is safe now. Unbeknownst to everybody, Aslan made a deal. He was like, instead of taking Edmund and killing him, you can have me. Kill me instead. Kill me in Edmund's place. And of course the White Witch agrees. And so during that night, Lucy and Susan can't sleep and they go outside of their tent and they see Aslan walking off and they follow him and they see him get killed by the White Witch and all of her people, her ogres and hags and, all the gross creatures are all gathered together as they kill Aslan. So Lucy and Susan are very upset about this, of course. But then the next morning, they are sleeping there, and the next morning they hear a loud crack, and they see that the stone table has cracked, and they see that Aslan is once again alive. And there he is, better than ever. And so from there, the three of them, Lucy, Susan, and Aslan, go to the Queen's castle, and he revives everyone that had been turned to stone. And then from there, that whole group goes to where the battle is happening, because in the morning, while Aslan and Lucy and Susan were at the Queen's castle, the Queen had attacked all the good guys that were hanging out. And so Peter had been leading a charge and there was this huge epic battle happening. But by the time Aslan shows up, he sees that Peter and the White Witch are fighting a one-on-one, but Peter doesn't look to be doing well, so Aslan interferes and he kills the White Witch. And then we see Edmund had been injured, and we hear that everybody had been trying to get the Queen herself, but then Edmund attacked her and he went straight for her wand because she was turning people to stone left and right. But then Edmund comes up and he's smart and he attacks her wand instead and he breaks it, but then she injured him in the process. And in the book, we hear all about this after the fact, and we don't see any battle scenes at all, which I'm fine with because I'm not big on battle scenes, especially reading about them. I find that really boring. Whereas in the movie, of course, they had to show the battle scenes, so in the movie, we see what's happening with Peter and all the people that are gathered together and how he needs to lead this army and the pressure he feels. And we see him and Susan practicing with their bows and arrows and their fight skills and everything. And we see the actual battle take place. And the White Witch in the movie has she has part of Aslan's mane that she's wearing because they had shaved it off. And she also looks like she's going for a lion look, thinking that she is now the one in control and mocking Aslan by dressing up as a lion herself. But of course, Aslan had come back to life, grew his mane back, and then he ends up killing the White Witch in both book and movie. But yeah, in the book, when they arrive, Lucy has that potion that heals people and she goes to Edmund and gives him some because he had been injured. And in the book, she's busy, waiting for Edmund to be revived. And Aslan tells her there's other people that are injured too and that need help. And she's yeah, okay, just give me a minute. And then Aslan chastises her and is do more people need to die for Edmund? And she realizes that she needs to continue on and help other people. And that exchange is totally left out of the movie. That's not there at all. Lucy just gets up and helps people without having to be told what to do. And then I totally forgot to mention too a line from the movie where when Aslan comes back to life, he tells Lucy and Susan, if the witch knew the true meaning of sacrifice, she might have interpreted the deep magic differently. That when a willing victim who has committed no treachery is killed in a traitor's stead, the stone table will crack and even death itself would turn backwards. And that's a quote from the movie, but there's a line similar to that in the book. But yeah, in the end, good wins, and the kids become kings and queens of Narnia over at Cair Paravel. And then Aslan leaves, but they're like, oh, don't worry, he'll be back. He comes and goes. And then we flash forward like 10 to 15 years, and the kids are now adults, and they are chasing after a white stag. In the movie, we don't know why, but in the book, we learn that the white stag is like magical, of course, and it can grant you a wish if you capture it, so that's why they're chasing it. And their life back in England, they remember like as if it had been a dream because it's been so long now. And as they're chasing the stag, they come across the lamppost and they see it and they're like, like this seems familiar. And then they keep walking and then they find the wardrobe and then they all tumble out of the wardrobe back into the professor's home. And they are all the age they were when they first went into Narnia. Because time in Narnia is different. You can spend years there and it's like hardly any time at all goes by in the real world. So when they come back, they are young again. And in the movie, the professor is right there when they come out of the wardrobe. And they're like, oh, you'd never believe what happened. And he's like, try me. And then we fade to black. Whereas in the book, they talk to the professor. And turns out he has been to Narnia before, and he tells them how, like, you'll end up going back to Narnia again, but you don't decide when. Like, Narnia will just make itself available to you when you are needed. And that is how the book ends. Which, to talk about the professor some more, after Lucy and Edmund came back from Narnia, and Edmund lied and he said they were making it up, it was causing this fight between the kids, and so Edmund and Lucy so Susan and Peter talked to the professor being like, hey, Lucy says they went to Narnia, Edmund says they didn't. Lucy is usually the honest one, so we're thrown off because clearly her story is ridiculous and it can't be true, but then why is she lying about it? And they were just very confused about the whole situation. And they thought the professor would be like, Narnia is clearly rubbish, something's wrong with Lucy. But instead, he encourages them to believe in Lucy. And he's like, maybe Narnia is real. Maybe you shouldn't doubt her so much. And so they're thrown off by that. But of course, we realize that it is because the professor has been to Narnia himself. And he is Diggory from the magician's nephew. And like I said, magician's nephew is like the origin. You find out the origin of the lamppost and the wardrobe and the queen and all that stuff. But yeah, to move on to the Christianity aspect. So C.S. Lewis was actually an atheist. So when he was a teenager, his mom died and that like kind of made him become an atheist. And then he fought in World War I and that just furthered his atheist beliefs. However, when he was like 32, I believe I read, he just felt that there was a God and he couldn't deny it and he became a Christian. And there is a quote from his book Surprised by Joy where he wrote, "Night after night, feeling whenever my mind lifted even for a second from my work, the steady, unrelenting approach of him who I so earnestly did not want to meet. That which I greatly feared had at last come upon me. In the Trinity term of 1929, I gave in and admitted that God was God, and I knelt and prayed. Perhaps that night, the most dejected and reluctant convert in all of England." So I thought that was funny because he so badly did not want to believe in God, but it came to a point where he felt like he just couldn't deny it any longer. And the title of that book, Surprised by Joy. So C.S. Lewis was married to Joy Davidman, and I have mentioned her before because she was married to William Lindsay Gresham, the author of Nightmare Alley, which I covered. So if you want to hear me talk about William Lindsay Gresham some more, you can check out my Nightmare Alley episode. A very different book, two very different men, but Joy Davidman was married to both of them. Anyway, so in Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, in the Narnia series, Aslan obviously represents Christ, and he sacrifices himself in place of Edmund in the way that Christ sacrificed himself for us. Because Edmund had a debt that he couldn't pay. The only way to pay the debt would be to give his life to the witch, right? But in order to avoid having to give his life, Aslan gave his life instead, the ultimate sacrifice. Just like if you're Christian, you believe that by living here on earth, all of us sin in some way or other, and we can't pay the debt that it would take to get back to our eternal lives. But Christ did pay that debt, so thanks to him, we can get back to our eternal lives because he sacrificed himself, but then like Aslan, he was reborn, thanks to a deeper magic that existed. His ultimate sacrifice led him to be able to be resurrected. And in the movie, I don't remember this in the book, but in the movie, after the witch dies, after he kills her and everything's done, Aslan says, "It is finished." I do not remember that in the book, but obviously that is similar to what Christ said when he was on the cross right before he died. He said, "It is finished." So yeah, like I said, this isn't a book I have read much, and the movie I had never seen since 2005. And I remembered, of course, that Aslan sacrifices himself and then he is resurrected, but I did not remember why he sacrificed himself. I had totally forgotten that he sacrificed himself in place of Edmund. So I thought that was cool because that was something that I totally hadn't remembered. I hadn't remembered the reason for why he decided to let the witch kill him. But anyway, so definitely very similar to the reason why Christ allowed himself to be killed. But anyway, when it comes to book versus movie, I do think the book wins here. I did really like this movie a lot, but like I said, there's like 10 minutes of it that could have been cut. And honestly, I probably wouldn't watch it again unless I'm with people who haven't seen it or something. Like, I don't see myself just choosing to rewatch this movie. However, I don't know, even the book, I don't think I would read again anytime too soon. But reading the book did make me want to read all of the Narnia books yet again, so I will be doing a book versus movie for Prince Caspian and Voyage of the Dawn Treader. They stopped making adaptations after those two because the last two didn't do very well, but I will cover those two at some point, and then I'll be reading the rest of the series even though they don't have movies for it, aside from the BBC versions. But anyway, so yeah, I would recommend this movie, but ultimately the book wins. And that wraps it up for The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Comment down below your thoughts, what you thought of this movie, what you thought of Tilda Swinton's outfit, if you liked it or not. Also, like I said, I grew up with the BBC version, so I always imagined the White Witch looking like she does in those BBC films. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on James McAvoy as Mr. Tummis. Let me know your thoughts on the Chronicles of Narnia in general. Comment down below what your Christmas plans are. And I hope you guys all just have a very Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, whatever holiday you celebrate. I hope you have a great December, a great end of the year. We are about to get to 2023, which is pretty crazy. I will be taking next week off, I believe, but I will be back at the beginning of January with another book versus movie. Follow me on Instagram. That is where I post my book versus movie schedules. So follow me there, and you can stay up to date because I post on Instagram fairly regularly. I've also been doing more shorts on YouTube, so shorts is the way of the future when it comes to YouTube apparently, so check those out and let me know your thoughts and how you like them. I'm still trying to figure it out. Same with Reels on Instagram, but anyway, I digress. Thank you for watching this video, listening to this podcast. Don't forget to give my podcast a rating and review, and don't forget to subscribe and to like this video, and thank you all so much for supporting my channel, and I will see you next time. Bye.